the whistling of the wind. The cold sting of it pierced through layers of fabric and equipment. Worn out and probably by this time even outdated. Yet it still does its job as intended. Until it finally fails, that is. This is their final holdout, right? I asked the group of my comrades up front. The commanding officer was up front, making way through the snow for the rest of us. It was their final holdout. A battalion dealt with the little resistance they put up, he replied, glancing back just for a second before continuing through the snow. We're there to reinforce the garrison. We should be there in about 30 minutes. When we first arrived here, I remember we had an abundance of just about everything. This was a major multi-year operation after all. It was supposed to be a quick landing, topple the central governing body and establish order in the chaos. The occupation should have been the toughest part. 3 years tops, they said, but they put up far more resistance than initially expected. First, it began with logistical problems, then fuel shortages, then ammunition started to run dry, then it was weapons, then it was soldiers. And the goddamn distance between this hell and home is close to impossible to resupply. That's why we had to go on foot one part of the trip. I can see why they sent those poor bastards up here as punishment, I heard one of the soldiers in the back shout. What would I give to get back to the sunny equator? Some sort of civilization? Yeah, and be eaten by the wildlife. Remember, we pummeled what was left of that so-called civilization to the fucking ground. Another voice shouted in the back, replying to the soldier in front of him. Don't forget about the guerrilla fighters. Those damn kobolds just don't know how to quit. I replied in frustration, recalling the time back when I was stationed at the equator. The pandemic is killing them off quickly. They'll probably go extinct by the time we leave. A soldier that was right in front of me replied. If we leave, and I heard some of them have started gaining immunity, and if that's true, considering the pace at which they reproduce, they'll bounce back in a decade or less. I said, remembering the statistics and physiology of our enemies. Shut up! The voice of the commanding officer boomed. We all stopped in our tracks and shut our mouths. There's something in the snow. Check it out. We looked where he pointed with his rifle. There was a small mound in the snow. Could be a rock or something, but upon closer inspection there was the unmistakable sight of a few fingers protruding from the snow. We held our distance. We knew it could be a trap or something. The commanding officer raised his rifle and aimed. He shot at the mound a few times. The snow flew into the air, clearing the snow partially to what was evidently a corpse. Once we confirmed it was safe, a few of us approached it, still watching our step. The commanding officer was the first. He poked the kobold corpse with his skis. It was frozen stiff, lying face down. A female, I think. There's something under her. He looked at the soldier closest to him. Help me lift her up. The soldier nodded and knelt with the commanding officer. It took a bit of time before they were able to pry her from the ground. But with the sound of shattering ice, they managed to lift her up. There was indeed something under her, glued to her body. Jesus Christ, the soldier who helped the commanding officer lift her said under his breath. 4 young, a few months old tops, the commanding officer said. She probably tried to get to a refugee center that was just over the hill. Wasn't the refugee center active like half a year ago? I asked. It was more like a slum, actually. The cold conditions preserved the bodies rather well. So close, yet so far. After that, we continued up the hill to what was the new base, and what was a quote-unquote refugee center. It was a small settlement before we came here. Still is, but the population swelled as the population ran from the major population centers on the equator. As we slowly reached the top of the hill, I couldn't get the sight of the kobold mother and her children from my mind. I've seen my fair share of fucked up shit during the operation. I managed to push those back to the deepest recesses of my mind, but I think this one is going to linger for quite some while. We finally reached the top of the hill. We were bathed in the light of the 2 alien suns that slowly set on the horizon. Gazing downwards, we saw the settlement, a hodgepodge of hastily built dwellings interspersed with professional military buildings, barracks for us humans and such. There was a wall about 10 feet in height around it. It looked like something from a medieval fantasy more than a modern base. Refugee center, or whatever the fuck it was at this point. This is Thomas Reynolds, Strike Team 29, 14. We have a visual on North Regina. We are approaching southbound, so hold your fire. Do you copy? The commanding officer said into his helmet mic. I could hear the reply faintly. This is North Regina to ST 2914. We see you. You're clear to enter. We rolled downhill with our skis to the main entrance to North Regina. Even through my mask, I could smell some type of odor, like something was rotting inside. The doors opened and we entered the base. There wasn't much activity on the inside. We saw humans, some kobolds. They, the kobolds, were wearing protective gear, masks. As I removed my skis, I could see why. In the distance, I saw dozens of body bags lined up on the muddy street. We were greeted by a couple of soldiers. They did introduce themselves, but I couldn't remember the names for the life of me. Not like it mattered anyway. As we walked down what seemed to be the main street of the place, we could see the extent to which the pandemic reached. The local kobold population was decimated. Yeah, I know. There were about 10,000 kobolds for 1,000 of us here at one point. A few months ago, it started to ramp up. More than half are in those bags now. He pointed at the lines of body bags littering the street. I saw kobolds in protective gear and humans without any sort of biohazard protection counting and dragging bodies from the houses and barracks. Makes the Black Death back on Earth seem like the common cold. The other soldier escorting us commented briefly. There was silence as we continued to walk. I looked down at the ground, trying not to look at my surroundings. I knew what the kobolds thought of us. I could feel their gaze pierce right into my soul. A year earlier, we would have been killing each other. But now, well, they have no choice but to cooperate. This is it, gentlemen. It ain't much, but it'll serve you well, the soldier escorting us said, handing the keys to Thomas. He simply nodded. We brought this upon them, by the way, he said quietly. What? The soldier who escorted us said, confused. Nothing, thanks. We'll be resting for the day if you don't mind. I know you've got your hands full, he said, looking down the street at the rising piles of corpses. Yeah, sure you had a long trip, the soldier who escorted us replied in a monotone voice, before turning around and leaving with his comrade. We entered the barracks, and as the guy said, it wasn't much. But it was a whole lot better than what the kobolds had. We even had some heating. I plopped down on a bed, claiming it, and so did the rest of us. We ate in silence mostly. Some of the guys had some chit-chat, but nothing worth noting. Mostly commenting on the taste of the rations, or lack thereof. As night slowly fell on the base, we all sat or lay on our beds trying to fall asleep, but to no avail. Everyone save for Thomas, who sat on his bed smoking some cigarettes he somehow managed to get his hands on. I wonder how's the situation back south. If it is this bad here, one of the guys commented. It's catastrophic. 1/3 of the population is dead, about 200 million, Thomas said, exhaling smoke from his lungs. I raised my head and sat up on the bed. Sir, if I may ask, how do you know that info? I asked. He looked at me, taking a long drag and exhaling, before extinguishing the cigarette. He sighed. Who gives a fuck, I'll tell you. Everyone raised their heads to that remark. Thomas got the attention of the whole group. He turned around and sat on a stool in the center of the small barracks. You all know basic biology, I assume? Some history? Or do I have to remind you all? He said, looking at each of us. Sighing, he began. When we first arrived here 3 years ago, our primary mission was to occupy and eventually annex this planet with all of its inhabitants. I don't know what the leaders back on Earth had going through their heads. How they planned to integrate a wholly different species with different customs, mentality. Everything in a human political system is beyond me. It was dumb. Didn't make any sense, but we are soldiers. We do not ask questions, we just do as we are told. You remember the backlash back on Earth this announcement caused? Us invading an alien civilization that was technologically inferior to us. But the government is not that stupid. They had other reasons. Something else was at stake. One of the primary reasons, from what I hear, is the planet's habitability. About the same size as Earth, with slightly higher gravity, nothing that would have long-lasting health effects. An almost identical atmospheric chemical composition. Strategic resources as well. Power projection politics. This disease that is spreading among the kobolds has its origin back on Earth. Some idiot sneezed on a lizard, and now we have a humanitarian crisis the likes we'd never seen. Planet fucking wide. But don't you think that this would have happened the moment we fucking landed? We, to this day, have procedures to minimize the containment on the local flora and fauna, and we did a stellar job at it for the last 2.5 years. And now, just now, did we slip up? How come? Thomas began his spiel. He looked at us. Boss, what's your point? You think this was intentional? One of the guys asked. Do you guys remember when you learned about the discovery of America? When the Europeans first landed in the New World? What happened? Thomas asked us. A pandemic. The local population lacked immunity to European diseases, thus they succumbed en masse to them, I answered. Exactly. And due to that example, we have the procedures to prevent that from happening. But to answer your question, yes, this was intentional. After over 3 years of being bogged down, losing upwards of 250,000 men and women and God knows how much money on this, the higher-ups decided to have a change of plans. To throw the Geneva Convention, the Extraterrestrial Rights Act, and every other fucking constitution down the drain. This is a biological war. He paused for a few moments. We are committing genocide on these creatures. We are wiping an entire advanced civilization off the face of the star map. And as things are now, from what I could gather from my contacts, you guys aren't going back to your families. There was a collective yell among everyone. Shock, denial. With all due respect, sir, but we were told that we are going home by year-end. Originally, we were supposed to be en route to Saul already, one of the soldiers yelled. Calm your ass down, Nikita. One of the guys grabbed him. I am not staying on this fucking rock a day longer. I want back home, Nikita yelled. That doesn't mean you won't see your families. Thomas continued calmly like nothing had happened. We won't be going home most likely, but our families will be coming to us. What? I said. You're implying colonization. Not full scale, but we'd have a significant minority if the population continues to plummet at this rate. It would help cement human rule on the planet, Thomas said. Nah, I don't want any of my family near this damned planet. And besides, what if we told the higher-ups of what you said, huh? What then? Nikita said. Nothing, they couldn't give a damn. We can't do shit to stop this. There was a breakthrough in hyperdrive tech. They'll be sending the first ships through within a year. They'll be here much faster than we have. The official statement is going to be released in a few months. I am simply informing you in advance. I'll be reprimanded, yes, but ultimately nothing will happen to me. Earth is not that near after all, Thomas said, lighting another cigarette. Nothing? What about we took it into our hands? Nikita said. Shut the fuck up, Nikita, you imbecile. Do you think he is to blame for this? He's bound to get his ass whooped just by saying this to us. Another chimed in. Then why didn't he tell us earlier? Nikita replied. Because of that kind of reaction. That's first. Secondly, I hadn't confirmed any of the information beforehand. Heard some of the higher-ups whisper about it back at HQ. Peeked at a few documents, Thomas said. Then silence. Deafening silence. I had to speak up. Going home? Who cares about that at this point? What do you guys think you'll just go back to normal after coming back? Everyone just stared at me. Speak for yourself, Nikita replied. I sure am. I am sure none of us mind the stench of corpses. Surely none of us bat an eye when we kill a dozen or so kobolds, armed or unarmed. I see none of you even fucking listen to Thomas to what he said. Because we are all to blame for this. All of you. Including myself, we feigned shock when we found the corpse of a kobold woman holding her children in the snow. Now imagine a human woman with a toddler in her hands, frozen stiff in Arctic weather. 200 million dead from this pandemic alone. How many have we directly or indirectly killed? We've all sworn a goddamn oath to protect mankind. Not to kill every non-human sentient being in existence. See all those corpses outside? That's us! We are to blame for that. I would have gladly died protecting Mars, Earth, any of the inhabited moons, hell, even a fucking mining station in the Oort. But dying here under an alien sun, wiping an advanced civilization of intelligent beings from existence, that's not what any of us signed up for. Change the perspective, guys. I watched a movie when I was a kid with my granddad. It was called Independence Day. Do you know what it was about? An alien invasion of Earth. Massive fucking mothership attacking Earth. They killed without remorse, millions. And of course, we won by the end. We were the underdogs. Do you know who the underdogs are now? The kobolds. We, in our massive ships, came from so far that even we can barely fathom, using weapons that look like fucking magic to a planet with a civilization that barely entered the Industrial Revolution. And you, Nikita, tell me to speak for myself. I do, I fucking do. And I sure as hell speak for you, and every other human being on the surface of this poor fucking planet. Guess what? There is no happy ending for the kobolds. This ain't no movie. I couldn't hold back. The words flew out of my mouth. Oh, we knew we weren't the good guys since the beginning. No need to give a lecture, one of the guys replied. Then, I don't know. Sorry, I had to get it off my chest. We should just leave. Leave and never come back, one of the guys said. And then what? We just scramble out of here, leave a few pieces of tech in the rush. Let them recover. Give it a century or two, they'll have 10 times the population with tech on par with us, and a burning wish for vengeance. Then you'd be the one in the body bag, but not in the Arctic of this shithole, but in Kansas, Greenland, China, or wherever you are from. We're too deep in this shit, another replied. There was silence in the room, deafening. Ooh. All right. Thomas threw a pack of cigarettes on a small table in the center of the barracks. Who needs one? Take it. There's at least one for each of us. Don't get greedy. Once you're done, go to your bunks. We have a long day ahead of us. Thomas stood up from the stool and dropped onto the bed, covering himself and promptly falling asleep. A few of us took a ciggy, having a smoke to calm our nerves. I took one and sat beside a window, looking out into the dark, muddy streets littered with kobold corpses in bags through the frosted glass. I fiddled with a cigarette for a few minutes, lost in thought. I saw another human soldier passing by, but he was followed by a small figure waddling right behind him. It was a kobold, probably hatched not too long ago. They learn to walk within the first month of their life. They tend to imprint on the first living thing they see. It takes about 5 years for their brains to fully develop. Only then do they become fully independent. I lit the cigarette, looking at the duo walking by slowly. Then the soldier stopped and turned around to look at the small kobold. I stopped, tensing up. The soldier approached the kobold. I started to rise from my seat. Then he patted the kobold's head, picking the kobold up. The soldier smiled as the kobold tried to scratch his face, expertly avoiding his little claws. He unzipped his jacket and put the kobold inside, only its head peeked out. He walked off then. I saw he took something out of his pocket and put it up to the kobold's mouth, probably feeding him or her. I then felt a sting on my hand. I let out a weak yelp. A piece of ash from the cigarette fell on my hand. I quickly brushed it off and sat back down. I sat there pondering. What would I say to my family? My friends back home? I have no heroic tales to speak of. I have nothing but regret. I then recall what Thomas said. The thought lingered. And it lingered. Are our hearts cold or are we cold-hearted? I asked myself. We are capable of both great and horrible deeds. This whole operation, all the time that had passed since we arrived. A shit show, a massive shit show. We should have stayed in our lane. We could have just observed them passively, looked at their development, and maybe learned something from it. But I wasn't the one making decisions. And in the end, all I can do is sit beside a frozen window looking into the darkness outside, smoking a cigarette. A scary monster from beyond the clouds, longing for the warmth of the sun I was born under.